You have no idea how the ancient Egyptians escaped the heat, and you will be shocked when you learn the truth. In the heart of the scorching desert, where the sun knows no mercy, one of the greatest civilizations in human history was born. For thousands of years, the ancient Egyptians not only survived under the blazing sun, they built colossal pyramids, created timeless works of art, and ruled a powerful empire. Their secret was not to fight nature, but to live in harmony with it, using ingenious and sometimes completely unexpected methods to escape the heat. Many of their solutions were so effective that they are admired by modern engineers and architects. They turned their homes into cool oases, their clothes into a kind of air conditioning, and their food and drinks into a way to cool the body from within. This story is not about magic, but about a deep understanding of the laws of physics, honed by centuries of observation. Watch the video to the end to learn how a special structure on the roof of a house turned the scorching desert wind into a cool breeze. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret that will change your perception of ancient Egyptian beauty. We are accustomed to thinking of the famous black eyeliner used by both men and women in Egypt exclusively as an element of makeup. However, its main function was far from aesthetic and had vital practical significance. This eyeliner, known as kohl, was made from finely ground galena, or lead glance. When applied to the eyelids, this mineral created a dark outline around the eyes. It worked like sunglasses, absorbing excess light and reducing the glare from the bright desert sun. This effect was especially appreciated by workers building pyramids and sailors traveling on the Nile. Their eyes were constantly exposed to aggressive sunlight reflected from sand or water. Kohl helped them see better and protected their eyesight from damage. In addition, the Egyptians believed that galena had bactericidal properties. They believed that the eyeliner protected the eyes from various infections that could spread with dust and sand. Thus, makeup was both a sunscreen and a kind of medical procedure. The process of making kohl was quite laborious. The mineral was carefully ground into powder on special pallets, mixed with water or fat to form a paste, and applied with a thin stick. This ritual was part of the daily routine for Egyptians of all social classes. Special vessels called kohl pots, which were often true works of art, were used to store the eyeliner. They were made of stone, faience, or ivory. The presence of such an item in a tomb indicated that the Egyptian cared about their health and appearance even in the afterlife. Thus, what we perceive as a symbol of fashion was in fact a complex tool for survival. It is an ingenious combination of aesthetics and functionality. The ancient Egyptians did nothing just for the sake of it, and even their pursuit of beauty had a deep practical meaning. They did not simply adorn themselves, they adapted to the harsh conditions of their environment. The black line around the eyes was not a whim, but a necessity dictated by the climate itself. This knowledge was one of the keys to their prosperity in the desert. This example shows how inventive the inhabitants of the Nile Valley were. They found unconventional solutions to everyday problems. Their cosmetics were not a mask, but a shield that protected them from the scorching sun. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this practical use of cosmetics? Let me know in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how clothing can work better than any fan? The secret to the comfort of the ancient Egyptians in extreme heat lay in one simple but ingenious material: linen. It was used to make almost all clothing, from simple loincloths for workers to luxurious tunics for pharaohs. Linen has unique properties that make it the ideal fabric for hot climates. It is very light, durable, and most importantly, hygroscopic. This means that it can absorb large amounts of moisture and sweat, and at the same time dry very quickly, cooling the skin. Most Egyptian garments were white or light in color. This choice was not accidental. White reflects the sun's rays, preventing the body from overheating, while dark fabrics absorb heat and create discomfort. The cut of the clothing was also carefully thought out. It was loose and spacious, did not restrict movement, and ensured maximum air circulation between the fabric and the body. This created the effect of a constant light breeze, which helped to endure the heat. Men most often wore a simple loincloth called a skenti. Women wore straight Kalaziris dresses with one or two straps. Such clothing left the arms and shoulders exposed, promoting natural cooling. Flax production was one of the most important industries in the Egyptian economy. It was grown in fields along the Nile, then harvested, soaked, dried, and beaten to separate the fibers. Women spun these fibers into the finest threads, which were then woven into cloth on looms. The quality of linen fabric was an indicator of status. The poorest sections of the population wore clothes made of coarse cloth, while the nobility could afford fabrics as thin and transparent as cobwebs. Some samples found in tombs amaze even modern craftsmen with their skill. The Egyptians greatly valued cleanliness and neatness. They regularly washed their clothes in the waters of the Nile, using soda and special clay as detergent. Clean white clothes were not only a hygienic norm, but also a sign of civilization. This simple and functional clothing was the result of thousands of years of experience living in the desert. It was not a tribute to fashion in the modern sense. Each element was carefully designed to ensure maximum comfort in extreme conditions. What element of the wardrobe do you think protected from the sun and served as a status symbol? The answer to this question lies in the following most unexpected way to escape the heat. Something you've never seen before. An item that would seem to exacerbate the heat was actually one of the most effective ways to protect against it. We're talking about wigs, which were worn by people from all walks of Egyptian society. At first glance, this seems illogical, but behind this tradition lay an ingenious system of thermoregulation. The fact is that most Egyptians, including women, shaved their heads. This was done primarily for hygiene reasons. In a hot climate, hair became an ideal breeding ground for parasites, so it was removed. However, a bare head was completely defenseless against the scorching sun. Direct sunlight could lead to severe overheating and sunstroke. This is where the wig came in handy, acting as a protective helmet. Egyptian wigs were made from human hair, plant fibers, or sheep's wool. They were designed to create an air gap between the wig and the scalp. This gap acted as an insulator, preventing the heat from the sun from reaching the skull. Moreover, this design provided constant ventilation. Any breeze blew through the space under the wig, cooling the scalp. This was much more comfortable than wearing one's own hair, which was tightly fitted. Wigs were also an important status symbol. The more elaborate and expensive the wig, the higher the social status of its owner. Pharaohs and nobles wore elaborate, intricately braided wigs, often adorned with precious ornaments. There were special stands for caring for wigs. At the end of the day, the wig was removed, placed on a stand, and aired out. This allowed moisture and dust that had accumulated during the day to be removed, keeping it in good condition. During the hottest hours of the day, Egyptians could wet their wigs with water. As the water evaporated, it created an additional cooling effect. It was a simple but very effective way to quickly lower the temperature. Thus, the wig was a multifunctional device. It protected from the sun, provided ventilation, helped maintain hygiene, and demonstrated social status. This is another example of how the Egyptians turned a potential problem into an elegant and practical solution. This tradition seems strange to us, but it was perfectly logical in the context of the Egyptian climate. It shows that the most obvious solutions are not always the best ones. Sometimes you have to think outside the box to find the most effective way to achieve comfort. What if everything you've been taught about architecture is outdated compared to technologies from 3,000 years ago? The basis of Egyptian construction and the main secret of coolness in their homes was a simple and accessible material: Nile silt. After the annual flooding of the Nile, tons of fertile clay remained on the banks, which became the main building resource. The Egyptians mixed this clay with straw and sand for strength and formed it into bricks, which they then dried in the sun. These bricks, called adobe, had a unique property: high thermal inertia. This means that they heated up very slowly and cooled down just as slowly. The walls of Egyptian houses were made very thick, sometimes up to a meter wide. During a hot day, such a wall did not have time to heat up completely. It absorbed heat from the outside, but the interior remained comfortably cool. At night, when the temperature in the desert dropped sharply, the opposite process occurred. The thick walls began to slowly release the heat accumulated during the day. This allowed the house to maintain a relatively stable temperature, smoothing out sharp daily fluctuations. The windows in Egyptian houses were small and located high under the ceiling. This was done to allow as little direct sunlight as possible to enter. This window arrangement also promoted better air circulation. Hot air rose and escaped through them. The roofs of the houses were flat. They were also built of adobe and covered with a layer of palm leaves and clay. The flat roof was not only a structural element, but also additional living space that was actively used in the evening and at night. For additional protection from the sun, the exterior walls of houses were often whitewashed with lime or gypsum. The white color reflected the sun's rays, further reducing the heating of the walls. This simple solution significantly increased the efficiency of the natural air conditioner. This architecture was the result of centuries of adaptation to the climate. It did not require complex technologies or expensive materials. Everything necessary for the construction of a cool and comfortable dwelling was provided by nature itself. Even the palaces of the pharaohs and the homes of the nobles were built according to the same principle. Of course, they were larger and more luxurious, but the basis of their comfort, thick adobe walls, remained unchanged. It was a time-tested technology available to everyone. What do you think was at the center of every wealthy Egyptian home? In the next chapter, you will learn how they created personal oases right in their own courtyards. The homes of wealthy Egyptians were built around a central courtyard. This layout was not accidental and played a key role in creating a comfortable microclimate. The courtyard became the heart of the home, a source of coolness and freshness. Often, a small pool or fountain was located in the center of such a courtyard. The water evaporating under the hot sun significantly cooled the surrounding air. This process, known as evaporative cooling, created a noticeable difference in temperature compared to the street. Various plants were planted around the pool. Date palms, sycamores, grapevines. Trees and climbing plants created dense shade, protecting the courtyard from direct sunlight. Their foliage also evaporated moisture, enhancing the cooling effect. In addition, the murmur of water and the rustle of leaves created a soothing atmosphere. The courtyard was a place of seclusion, protected from the noise and dust of the street. It was a real private oasis in the middle of a hot city. Even in the homes of less wealthy Egyptians, where it was not possible to build a large garden with a pool, they tried to organize a small shaded courtyard. Often, large clay vessels with water were placed there. Evaporation from their porous surface also helped to cool the air. This tradition of building houses with inner courtyards has survived in many countries with hot climates to this day. It has proven its effectiveness over thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians intuitively understood the laws of thermodynamics and used them to create a comfortable living environment. Thus, the Egyptian house was not just a collection of rooms, but a complete ecosystem. Every element, from the thick walls to the shady garden, worked toward a common goal. That goal was to create coolness and comfort in one of the hottest places on the planet. A secret passed down from generation to generation. What we eat and drink directly affects how we feel in the heat. The ancient Egyptians understood this well and built their diet to help the body cope with high temperatures. Their diet was light and refreshing. The basis of their diet was foods that did not require the body to expend a lot of energy to digest. The Egyptians ate a lot of vegetables and fruits rich in moisture. Cucumbers, lettuce, melons, and watermelons were especially popular, as they were excellent thirst quenchers. Onions and garlic played an important role in the diet. Despite their pungent taste, these vegetables stimulated perspiration. And the evaporation of sweat, as we know, is the main natural mechanism for cooling the human body. Heavy and fatty foods, especially meat, were consumed in moderation. They were eaten mainly in the evenings when the heat subsided. During the day, preference was given to light dishes such as flatbread with herbs, vegetable stews, and fish caught in the Nile. The main drink that saved them from the heat was not water, but beer. Egyptian beer, however, was very different from modern beer. It was thick, low in alcohol, and very nutritious, more like liquid bread. Thus, the Egyptians' diet was another element of their complex system of adaptation to the heat. They understood that the climate had to be fought not only from the outside, but also from the inside. Proper nutrition and beverages helped them maintain their strength and productivity under the scorching sun. What was the main feature of their daily routine? In the next chapter, we will learn how the Egyptians tricked time itself to avoid the scorching sun. The ancient Egyptians understood that it was pointless to fight the midday sun. Instead, they learned to adapt their daily routine to the rhythms of nature. Their working day was organized to avoid the hottest hours. Work in the fields and on construction sites began very early, with the first rays of the sun. The cool morning air allowed for intense and productive work. The most difficult physical work was done at this time. When the sun rose to its zenith and the heat became unbearable, all activity ceased. It was time for siesta, or afternoon rest. People hid in the shade of their cool homes to wait out the peak of the heat. This break could last several hours. During this time, the Egyptians ate lunch, slept, or did leisurely household chores. This was necessary to restore strength and prevent heat stroke. When the heat began to subside, closer to evening, work resumed. People returned to the fields and construction sites to work for a few more hours in comfortable conditions. This divided workday was much more effective than continuous work under the scorching sun. Evening and night were times of social activity. When the long-awaited coolness descended on the earth, life on the streets of towns and villages came alive. People left their homes to socialize with neighbors, visit the market, or simply take a walk. This principle of living in the shade allowed them to maintain high productivity even in extreme climates. It demonstrates their deep respect for the forces of nature and their ability to find common ground with them. They worked not harder, but smarter. The Great Nile River was not only a source of food and a transport artery, but also the main salvation from the heat. Proximity to water in itself created a milder and more humid microclimate compared to the scorching desert. All cities and settlements in Egypt were located along the banks of the river or its canals. Daily bathing in the cool waters of the Nile was an integral part of Egyptian life. Bathing was not only a hygienic procedure, but also a way to quickly cool down and refresh oneself. Children spent whole days in the river, escaping the heat. Wealthy Egyptians built special swimming pools called shi in their gardens and palaces. These pools were often rectangular in shape and lined with stone. They were filled with water from the Nile and served as a leisure center for the whole family. The pools were decorated with paintings of aquatic plants and fish, creating the illusion of a natural pond. Trees were planted around them to provide shade. Here they held celebrations and received guests, enjoying the coolness on a hot day. Water was also used for less obvious purposes. For example, the floors in houses were often sprinkled with water. As it evaporated, it cooled the air in the room and settled dust, making it easier to breathe. Slaves and servants often used large fans to create an artificial breeze for their masters. Sometimes vessels of cold water were placed next to them. The air passing over the water became cooler and more humid, creating a primitive version of air conditioning. Wet fabrics were also a popular way to combat the heat. Egyptians would wet their clothes or hang wet cloths in doorways. The evaporation of water from the fabric acted as an effective cooler. Life in the Nile Delta, with its numerous channels and swamps, was more comfortable in terms of climate. The abundance of water and vegetation created natural coolness. It is not surprising that this region was one of the most densely populated in ancient Egypt. The Nile was a sacred river for the Egyptians, a deity named Hapi. They understood that their entire lives, their prosperity, and their very survival in this harsh land depended entirely on it. The river provided them with food, water, crops, and of course, life-saving coolness. Thus, water in all its forms was central to the Egyptians' survival strategy. They masterfully used its cooling properties, turning their homes and gardens into cool refuges. It was a civilization born and nurtured by the great river. In conditions of complete calm, when even the hot air stood still, the only salvation was an artificial breeze. Fans and hand fans were an indispensable attribute of everyday life in ancient Egypt. They were available to everyone, but their appearance and material could say a lot about the status of their owner. The simplest fans were made from palm leaves or papyrus. They were light and affordable even for the poor. Such fans could be made at home or bought at the market for a small fee. More expensive fans were made from ostrich feathers. They were not only effective but also very beautiful. Long, lush feathers created a strong airflow and served as a luxurious accessory. The handles for such fans were often made of precious materials, ivory, ebony, or even gold. They were decorated with fine carvings and inlays. Such a fan was a sign of high status and wealth. The art of fan making reached a high level in Egypt. Some of the surviving examples found in tombs are true masterpieces. For example, several luxurious fans made of gold and ostrich feathers were found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Thus, in ancient Egypt, a fan was much more than just an object for creating a breeze. It was a tool for survival, a status symbol, a luxury item, and a work of art. This simple object demonstrates how important the fight against heat was in the everyday culture of the Egyptians. We have come to the most ingenious and technologically complex invention of the ancient Egyptians for combating the heat. It is a special architectural structure known as a malkaf or wind catcher. It was a true passive air conditioner that operated without any energy consumption. The malkaf is a special tower or shaft that was erected on the roof of a building. Its upper part was open to the prevailing winds, which in Egypt blow mainly from the north. The structure was designed to capture even the slightest breeze. Once inside the tower, the air rushed down a vertical shaft directly into the interior of the house. Passing through the shadow of the tower, it cooled slightly. This created a constant flow of fresh and relatively cool air. Often, the malkafa shaft led to a basement or semi-basement room. There, the air was further cooled by contact with the cool earth. Sometimes large porous vessels filled with water were placed at the bottom of the shaft, which further enhanced the cooling effect through evaporation. The cooled and denser air from the shaft displaced the warm air that had accumulated in the rooms. The warm air rose and escaped through windows or special ventilation openings under the ceiling. This created continuous natural circulation. The principle of the malkafa is still used in the traditional architecture of many countries in the Middle East. Modern architects involved in green construction are also studying these ancient technologies. They are looking for ways to cool buildings with minimal energy consumption, and the experience of the ancient Egyptians is invaluable here. The wind catcher is the crown jewel of the Egyptian system for combating heat. It combines a deep understanding of the climate, the laws of physics, and architectural skill. It is silent testimony to the fact that comfort and environmental friendliness can go hand in hand. We have looked at 10 ingenious ways in which the ancient Egyptians saved themselves from the scorching heat. From practical cosmetics and breathable clothing to complex architectural solutions, such as the wind catcher, their entire culture was permeated with the idea of adapting to the harsh climate. They did not just survive, they created a comfortable and harmonious living environment. Their legacy teaches us an important lesson. Complex problems do not always require complex technologies to solve. Sometimes the most effective answers lie on the surface, in harmony with nature and a deep understanding of its laws. The experience of a civilization that flourished in the desert for millennia is still relevant today, in an era of global warming and the search for environmentally friendly solutions. What other secrets of ancient civilizations would you like to uncover? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new fascinating explorations of the past.